space, the final frontier. These are the voyages of the starship Enterprise. Its 5-year mission, to explore strange new worlds, to seek out new life and new civilization, to boldly go where no man has gone before.
Greetings, salutations, and welcome to Retrek. I'm Captain Jim, and with me, of course, is Admiral Elliot.
Hi there.
And we're back talking about, we're still on Voyager and DS9. We're doing a much later Voyager. We've jumped from season 1 to season 6, and I think we said last week, like, we both thought Barclay came back a lot quicker in Voyager, but...
Yeah, because he ends up being in quite a lot of episodes by the end of it.
But it's sort of backloaded, the episodes he appears in, because this is season 6 and we're talking about Pathfinder. I think this is a really good episode. It breaks with the format, because this is pretty much a Barclay and Troy episode that happens to feature Voyager.
Yeah, but I think I like how this is done. That it is based on Earth and the efforts to Federation, because the Federation by this point do know that they are definitely there because the Doctor going to help the Prometheus.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, that's a good episode as well. Is Prometheus?
Yeah, so it's now seeing the efforts that Starfleet is now making to actually help them. Yeah,
and this it's almost sort of like a proof of concept show for like an Earth-based Star Trek series. I reckon you could do something like this, like have a show that's all about like Starfleet headquarters or scientific research or something set on Earth, and I think you could make a really interesting show out of that. And I find it interesting that this is a really good Voyager episode, and it barely features the Voyager. I mean, it does feature the Voyager crew a lot, but it doesn't feature them sort of in real time, if that makes sense.
It's featuring the characters, but
they're not the characters.
They're not the characters.
The actors all get to put in a day's work, apart from we'll comment on it later, but obviously they don't know about 7 of 9, so 7 of 9's not in any of the programmes. So then as soon as we do get back to the ship at the end, it's like, right, we've got to have Jerry Ryan in this scene because she's not been able to be in it all episode.
Because she hasn't been in it yet.
Yeah, exactly. Let's look at this one then. So we start off with Barclay on Earth, and it's quite clever, really, just how visually it sets where we are, because we get the First Contact uniforms, First Contact DS9. Right, okay.
It's somewhere between First Contact and Insurrection. This is set.
Yeah, so it's a way of telling us this is set in present day, if you like, on Earth, and we get that straight away. And then obviously Deanna turns up. So it's sort of referenced in the episode, isn't it? Like they say, the Enterprise is in orbit, and Picard's given the permission to spend a bit of time with him. So is it between first? We know he was on the Enterprise in First Contact.
Yeah. So I think it's between First Contact and Insurrection. This.
Yeah, that sounds about right, because obviously by Nemesis, Voyager's got home. So
yeah.
Yeah, so for some reason, Barclay seems to have transferred off the Enterprise. There's a weird...
And it is actually mentioned in this episode about him having transferred from the Enterprise to this posting.
Yeah.
Which does prove our point that we made last week, that he shouldn't have been in the episode.
Yeah, yes, that's very true, actually. You're right. Yeah, that'd make... Yeah, because we were talking about when did he go. And also... They've done, at the end of this episode, they say, it's this Lieutenant Barclay, and the Doctor doesn't say, you mean the one that I had the hallucinations about, who worked on the programme? No mention of that whatsoever, so...
it'd be interesting. it'd be something to look up if they decided to sort of take that sort of retcon that out of it.
Yeah,
if it's a subtle retcon that and there's only people like us who go in depth in these shows, looking back at them like now.
Yeah,
we're picking up on all these faults.
It does seem like it's just let's ignore that a little bit because we've decided a new story for Barclay now. Troy says to Barclay though, she says, "You always knew how to flatter me." Like, really, Deanna? So was it flattering when he was making dirty sex holograms of you on the holiday? I'm not sure that's flattery. I don't remember you being that impressed with it at the time, but...
Yeah, well, I think that she sort of plays it here, doesn't it? And it's like, the last time we saw him in The Next Generation, it was still awkward with people, but he'd settled in a little bit.
Yeah.
And I think, and this is sort of played that it took him time to make friends, but he did have a lot of friends on the Enterprise by the time he left.
Yeah, I think that is the case, definitely. And he's sort of almost back to square one now that he's in a different environment. And we see that his latest obsession, like the teaser finishes with it saying, "I've become obsessed with Voyager." And I almost do wonder whether this is meant to be sort of like a meta comment on fandom, like, you know, hey, we know that the fans are obsessed with Voyager. I don't know, maybe. And he's calling his Neelix, and which I'm sure there's probably a lot of people who do have cats called Neelix, so that's, you know.
It wouldn't. I think there actually was quite a few pets got Neelix and that after.
Yeah, well, it's a good name.
Sort of while Voyager was on and after.
Yeah, I think it's a good name for a cat. If I ever had another cat, I might call it Neelix, but I don't think I'd ever have another cat, so there we go. So then we see his behaviours sort of repeating himself because he's running a holo program now of the Voyager bridge. So, and they do touch on it a little bit in this episode, like, have you fallen back into the holo addiction and everything?
Yeah.
So I think that's good that they're not ignoring.
I don't think he's fallen back as far as it was when we first saw him, because he's not sort of trying. He's not sleeping with Janeway and Ballard and all the rest of them, is he?
Yeah, he's not making them into goddesses and stuff.
So he's not gone as is that like he is using it as a tool to try solve the problem.
Yeah, it's almost a bit of a commentary on the whole sort of like Mary Sue phenomenon, and I mean that in the original context of the word rather than sort of how it's used now. In that, you know, people would write fan fiction and put themselves in, effectively, they'd write themselves into an episode of Star Trek. And that's what Barclay's doing here, is he's writing himself into the story of Voyager. And I feel like it is very much like a fan would do. Like if you imagined, I joined the Voyager crew and I'm great at everything, and they all come to me and they ask me how to do this and how to do that.
And I solve the problems, and
that's what it feels like. It's almost like Barclay's a stand-in for a Star Trek fan who might imagine himself in that world.
There is part of this, and I can actually relate to. And he finds he sleeps better in the holodeck quarters that he's got on Voyager. But his quarters on the holodeck Voyager are all lovely and smart, and everything's in its correct place. And I was thinking he can program that like that, and it all goes there all the time. Yet his own actual apartment, it's not unpacked anything.
That's
so everything's messy and all over. So he probably thinks, well, this is actually easier, and I can be quite a messy person, and I can see the attraction of actually, if like a lot of the stuff was holographic and I could go, right, I don't need that box of this anymore, so
that would
right,
be good.
it's off now and out of the way.
Yeah, you can definitely see that, and it'd be so much easier. Like, I think that's kind of it's sort of a metaphor for Barclay not being able to deal with real life as much, isn't it? It's like, you know, you don't unpack your actual apartment, but You don't need to because you've got this hollow one that you can.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Now, Barclay's got this idea. The whole crux of the episode is we're going to set up a two-way comms, and I like that. There's a reference to DS9 as well. Like he says, "Oh, some of the information or something came from a scan that DS9 did." So I like that you're getting all three modern eras of Trek referenced in this one episode.
It's referencing that it all. It's you don't need to see DS9, but it is making you fully aware that DS9 exists within this universe.
Yeah, and DS9 had finished at this point, so we don't really know what happened with the station, but it's going, no, it's still there, they're still doing things.
Yeah.
It's fine, so that's good. And then we go to Barclay's lab, and did you spot the prop, the big prop with the lights that go around in the two tubes?
Well, that's how you know that it's a science lab in Star Trek, or at least in Next Generation era. Next Generation era, Federation science labs all had the big red tubey thing.
Yep, and I think it was first in Wrath of Khan, wasn't it? Like it was in Carol Marcus's lab, I think.
Yeah. Oh, it goes.
And then
it's been really well used as this prop,
and not just in Star Trek. It's been in other shows and stuff. This is just a sci-fi prop that comes. I think there's YouTube videos actually showing it. So if you're not sure which prop we're talking about, you can find out on YouTube, and it's in lots of stuff. And we're having problems with what we normally get our sort of like pictures that we put up. I'll try sort it out because normally we could have just pulled up an image of it. Yeah, but I'm sure most people will know which one we're on about, and if not, it's the cylinder with the lights that is in loads of stuff. And then we find out that Barclay's boss seems to be trying to set him up with someone, which is
his sister.
His sister, so he's obviously reasonably well thought of if his boss is thinking.
Well, he's also on their first name terms with his boss.
Yeah, exactly. So
which is noticeable. Reggie's obviously awkward and he's socially awkward, but this guy obviously has time for him and he's being friendly to him, and on the first name basis he calls him Pete. He's inviting him to his house for a meal. Wants him to meet his sister.
Yeah, he's, like you say, he's obviously. I think that's one of the things about Barclay, and I think people who are socially awkward to that extent don't realise how much they are liked quite often. Like, that's part of the social anxiety is that, and you think, oh, well, people don't like me, but clearly people do like him.
Yeah.
To the extent that, like we say, he's trying to set him up with his sister, so, I like some of the details in Barclay's holo creation, like the Maquillan in Starfleet uniform. And I really like that because unless you knew that the first thing they'd done is put them all in uniform and off we go, you would assume this. Right, no, it's two separate crews. And
the Doctor's obviously giving some information, and he's obviously said the Maquis crew is merged with us and working together.
Yeah.
So he doesn't know. I know B'Elanna is playing the part of the chief engineer still, but that's a bit of a jump. Would he know that? But I can let that go, and I think it's nice that it's put them into the same clothing that they had when we first saw them in the Caretaker.
Yeah, and it's one of them where it's almost like, here's what you could have won. So it's like, that might have been more interesting if you'd kept the crews a bit more separate than what you did. But
we have said this. We have said this, haven't we? Quite a lot. That one of the tricks Voyager really missed out on was the conflict they could have had between the two crews.
Definitely,
we got little bits, but we didn't get the Marquis are really against what the Federation has done. How it was played, that they just went, okay, fine, yeah, let's drop Starfleet now. It doesn't play quite well.
No, it doesn't, and it's one of those things. And this is almost like Barclay's version of Voyager. Is almost a better version of the show that we actually got, or it looks like it, a more interesting version anyway. And we get this thing like Troy even points out to him, like, no, he invited you round to dinner and everything, so you have got real friends in the real world.
Yeah.
But instead, he's going back to the holodeck and everything, and you have this bit where he's sort of having a briefing with the crew and he's throwing ideas around and everything, and his boss walks into it and rumbles what's going on and boots him off the holodeck and everything. And then he goes to see Admiral Paris. Now, I want to know why Admiral Paris has got a picture of Nick Locarno from the first on his desk. Well,
there is a reason for that. And the reason is that Tom Paris, when he went to the academy, changed his name to Nick.
Right.
To avoid favouritism as being an admiral's son.
Oh, is that
so
what we're going through?
That's actually been put forward as why they're so identical and all that. Yeah. Nick actually is Tom Paris, but when he went to the academy, records were falsified, obviously from high up with his dad, the admiral,
so that they didn't know,
and that for him to have a different identity, so he didn't get favouritism, so he could actually go through as a normal cadet.
Right. Okay. Yeah, we can go with that as a fan theory.
I can't. It was only this week that I saw that,
and
and I wasn't even looking for it, and I thought that makes so much sense.
It does. I'm not sure if the timelines quite line up, but yeah, I am being facetious with that because it is a really good attention to detail to go, right, we've got this picture of Robert Duncan McNeil in a cadet's uniform, so let's use it and let's make that Tom Paris. It's a really clever little detail that they do, but because we're Star Trek geeks, we've got to point these things out. Like canonically, it has been put out there though that they are actually the same person. It was just a falsified name, which I think. Okay. What we've all seen of it, and it is the same actor, I think that is the most sensible way of looking at it. It probably is, yeah. And it's all because they didn't want to pay the writer of the episode, isn't it? So basically, it was. Well, it was an article I was watching, and that was brought up, and the writer has actually denied this, that he was demanding to be paid for every time Tom Paris this character appeared in future. He's denied that happening. I don't think it would have been a demand. I think it'd have been Writers Guild of America rules would have necessitated it. So I don't know. He might not have been bothered about it, the writer, but I think it would have been a union thing that they would have had to have done. So you get a bit of a weird setup for the rest of the episode because Barclay's like, well, let me try out my idea, and if it doesn't work, I'll hand in my resignation. And that's almost like, in wrestling where they have these silly matches where it's like, if you lose, you're fired sort of thing. It's like, this doesn't happen in real workplaces. No. Right, if this don't work, I'm going to resign. And it doesn't seem very Starfleety for an admiral to accept this. But the admiral doesn't really. See, it's like, I'll review it, but you're not going to be involved with it. So they do get a bit of a compromise. And then he asks Troy to put in a word for him, and she's like, well, no, because you don't seem like you're fit for work, to be honest. You're acting very irrationally. Yeah, exactly. And then, like you said, this is where we get a chat about how since he left the Enterprise, he's been more isolated and everything. And Troy takes the leave to help him. And then Barclay sort of goes a little bit rogue, like he breaks into the lab to try out his plan. And he gets rumbled by the guys, but he locks them out and he runs into the holodeck. And this is where I think the episode gets really, really fun. Like, you've got Barclay in the creation of Voyager, but he's got a leg up in there because he's already formed this relationship with all the characters in there. So when he runs into Tuvok, he's like, Tuvok, you've got to help me with this because these guys are after me. They're pretending to be staff.
Yeah, we've got...
Security.
Yeah, in Tuvok's computer, scan for...
Yeah.
Oh, right, intruder alerts.
So I think all that's really good fun. I think they could have, if they'd wanted to, they could have had even more fun with that and sort of extended that sequence and had little bits going on with him.
Yeah, I think it's one of those where, like, to be fair, I don't think you could have had longer of it because nothing in this episode is actually filler.
No, that's very true.
The episode plays brilliantly in its length. Like, you have all the build-up and what it's been going through. And
the thing is as well, like, you couldn't push it too far. Like, if you had Barclay on the holodeck getting Tuvok to shoot these guys, it's like, yeah, you're going to go to jail.
Well, B'Elanna does. When he passes B'Elanna does shoot them.
True, you're right.
But
if
obviously it's on a holodeck, so it doesn't harm them.
That's true. Yeah, I suppose if he'd have done anything that would have seriously harmed the guys, it wouldn't have been as easy for him to not lose his job. And ultimately, obviously, he manages to redirect the signal, and at the same time, you've got his boss trying to start a warp core breach, which kind of reminds us of projections that we looked at last week.
Yeah.
Let's destroy the warp core of a hollow program within a program, and
yeah,
so we're doing that again.
That'll sort of crash the program. Okay,
it makes more sense in this one because it's like if he does destroy the Voyager in the program, then it will stop the program, so they'll be able to find.
Yeah, and they'll all just be stood on the holodeck.
Exactly, so they'll just be straight back on the grid, and they'll just be able to nick him. But it's all quite fun where like he locks himself in a force field at the science bay and everything. And ultimately he sends the message off. And then it's like, so this is like the final act of the episode before we actually get the real Voyager. And we cut to the real Voyager. And like I said, straight away it's 7 of 9 because we've not had 7 of 9 in the episode yet. So we need to get her straight on. But it makes sense because it's the astrometrics lab, isn't it? So
yeah, that picks up the signal.
Yeah. And then sort of back on Earth, you've got Admiral Paris turns up and he's like, oh, Barclay, I've decided to do your plan anyway. But so if Barclay 5 minutes, he might not have had to go through all this stuff. But they get the message that comes through from Janeway, and then
well, they have to be quick because it works out from the point that the message entered the Delta Quadrant. They've actually only got 8 minutes 20 seconds.
Yeah, so they've got
communication because Tuvok says it's degrading by 0.2% a second, which works out at 500 seconds, which is 8 minutes 20 seconds. So.
Right. So yeah, they've got to do it all quickly. So it's a good sequence, and it's nice how you do get the sense of how monumentous it is that they're actually being able to speak properly to someone in the quadrant. And they get a bit where it's like, we'll send this data over, and we'll send you this, and you can send us that. But it's weird. Where Admiral Paris says, oh, tell my son this. And Janeway says, don't worry, he can hear you, Admiral. But Tom doesn't say anything back. And
I thought that.
Yeah, I know it's
I wonder if, I was thinking, is Tom deliberate, the Admiral's talking to Janeway, and is Tom actually being a really good officer here, and not blurting into it? And end up having a conversation with his dad when they have, he's maybe worked out they've only got 8 minutes, 20 seconds, the same as I have. And he's thinking, if I start having a conversation with my dad, Janeway won't have time to relay important information.
Yeah, that was my take on it. But
yeah, I think he was just being a really good officer here.
I think he was, yeah. He's like, obviously, we've got to do the necessary stuff rather than me talking to my dad. But
yeah,
I think it'd have been a nice touch if Janeway had have expressly given him permission to say something. Even if he'd have just said, I can hear you, Dad, or something. You know, I think that would have been...
We did have, was it Eye of a Needle with the Romulans, where they had the mini wormhole, and they all prepared personal messages for the families. So I'm assuming that they'll have them on file still in case something comes up. And they'll have just gone, and that'll be part of the compressed, and that's maybe part of the compressed file that they're sending, so...
Yeah, that would make sense.
So she said that they're sending logs and thing and other information, and I think that them logs include the personal messages that they all recorded for their families. Yeah,
I'm happy. I'm happy to headcanon that happened because that sounds right, and it makes sense.
Like,
to have everything.
Like I think that we get later that they write new messages, don't they?
Yeah, they do. They have a bit where it's more of a back and forth.
Yeah. But I'm thinking here that they've sort of, we'll use these, we've got these logs, fire them, because we haven't got long, there isn't time for anyone to record new stuff. Mm-hmm. Let's just send something, because at least it's telling all the families, look, you're now knowing from Starfleet that the Voyager's still safe, that we're all still on our way home. And my family now knows that at least that I've sent something to them.
Yeah, I'll agree with you on that one. I think that's right. It's weird what goes on with Barclay, though, because it's like, right, it worked. And obviously they defer to him while it's going on because he's worked on it all and everything. But they say, he's like, I'm sad that it's over. It's like, no, it's just the beginning. We're going to carry on. Like, I still think there'd be a bit of disciplinary action going on, Barclay.
Yeah, I think Barclay has to be disciplined in some way, and it probably needs to see his doctor, which is Troy. Troy's there, so he's probably going to have a bout of seeing her, which you get the impression because she's still at his apartment quite a bit after.
Yeah.
So I get the impression that a bit of time passes after because he's by the end of it, he's dating Pete.
Yeah, he's been dating, so it seems like he's getting better and everything. But
so I think that he's probably had to have some therapy, and he's probably on, if not lost all hollow privileges, he's on very strict rationing.
It's one of them where it makes sense on a character level. But it doesn't always make sense on a story level where you go, okay, they break the rules, but they get something done, so ultimately they're rewarded for it. But going back to Nick Lucano again, that's another example where the whole premise of the episode doesn't really work because it's like, oh, we're going to do this spectacular thing, but it's illegal. And it's like, well, even if you'd have pulled it off, you'd have still been booted out of the academy because it's illegal.
Yeah.
It's not illegal because you can't, it's so difficult to do. It's illegal because it's dangerous, so even if you pull it off safely, it's still illegal.
Yeah, even if you pull it off, you've been putting all your team in danger to actually pull it off.
So, and it's the same thing with Barclay here. It's like, yeah, you get the results, but you've still disobeyed direct orders and broken into a lab and effectively assaulted other members of the team. And so, anyway, like you say, the ending implies that he's back on track and he's okay and everything. And obviously, we'll catch up with him in a future episodes. We're going to stick with Barclay throughout the rest of his run. But let's switch to DS9 then, because finally we've got there. We're actually at not the start of the Dominion War as such, but the Dominion are actually here. We see them, we know who they are, or we know some of them are. This is like the start of the Dominion arc proper. we've done all the build up to it, but this is the season 2 finale, the Jem'Hadar. And just before we get into it, I remember when this episode was first announced, we talked the other week about how you used to get Star Trek magazine and it'd tell you what the upcoming episodes were. And this episode was originally billed as the Dominion rather than the Jem'Hadar. So I was like, oh, right, well, that makes sense because there's been these hints dropped to the Dominion, but they changed it to the Jem'Hadar. So you're like, oh, I don't know who the Jem'Hadar are. That's interesting. And obviously, we find out in this episode, but...
Yeah, we find out in a big way who the Jem'Hadar are.
Oh, yeah. And I think we've said this about DS9 a lot, and the whole point in us doing so many episodes building up to this was to illustrate how DS9 gradually built up to the Dominion and introduced different elements and did it in unusual ways. Like we talked about how the first time it's ever mentioned is in a comedy Ferengi episode. And even in this episode, like this is a season finale, but it doesn't really feel like a season finale until about a third of the way through the episode. And
it almost starts like it's ought to be a comedy episode, doesn't it?
Exactly. And that's very typical of DS9. It subverts your expectations because, at this point, and TNG pioneered it with Best of Both Worlds, you got to the point where you expect, and it's commonplace now, but you expect the season finales are going to be a big cliffhanger. Whereas you go back to Star Trek, the original series, and the season finale were just whichever episode they wrote last. It wasn't...
Well, not even necessarily whichever episode they wrote last. It's whichever episode finished production last.
Yes, exactly. So, there was nothing different about a season finale, really, than any other episode of the season. Whereas, by this point, the mid-90s, TV, the structure of TV tells us your season finale is going to be a big one. And
there's going to be something major happens. And
this does deliver on that, but like you say, for the first act or so of the episode, this looks like it's going to be like a buddy comedy between Sisko and Quark going to a planet, which is really interesting. Like, we've got Jake working on his science project, and I've always found this scene really weird because Sisko goes, okay, so if you can do anything you want, what do you want to do? And he says, learn how to pilot a runabout. And Sisko goes, no, that's not really science. What about your second choice? And Jake sort of looks up as if he's really surprised that he gets a second choice. It's like, you think it were like, you get your first choice. Nope, right, that's it. Conversation over. But it's the way Cyril Lofton plays it. He looks away and then he goes, okay, second choice. And he goes, what? It's just really weird. It's always struck me as really odd. But they decide they're going to do a planetary survey. It's a bit of a...
Yeah, Jake goes, I'd like to go to the Gamma Quadrant. That's fair enough. I don't think Jake's been through the wormhole, has he?
Don't think he has at this point, no.
By this point. So I can see why that would be an attraction. It's a big spectacle, the wormhole. Why I get to go through it.
I like that Sisko makes him work for it, though. He's like, okay, but it's meant to be a science project, so tell me what you're going to do when we get to the Gamma Quadrant. You've got to do something. And we'll do a planetary survey and everything. And then the reason Quark ends up going is because he's trying to use the station's monitors
Well, it starts, doesn't it? Like Sisko's obviously really made up about this, that he's going to... He's taking some time off to be a dad and spend some time with his son.
Yeah. And that's it.
and some family time.
He wants to actually
spend And then Jake goes and tells Nog.
Yeah,
and he invites him along.
And then Quark's going to come as well. And this is obviously why, when we get to season 3, Sisko builds that Bajoran solar sailor that's really tiny. He's like, no, Quark and Ron are not going to fit in here. We'll make it so. Jake. Then we get Sisko in his civvies, and I think this is something that Star Trek, I think they're starting to get better
struggles with,
like in Picard, but yeah, it's because this basically looks like a Starfleet uniform.
It's a funny thing, isn't it? It's because you had it. I'd say you had it in sci-fi right through, like from probably the 60s, 70s, right through through the 90s. That civilian clothing in the future is off to be absolutely ludicrous.
Yeah. They've always, like, I think they got it right in the TOS movies. Like in Star Trek 4, Sulu's rocking his cape thing or whatever. But it looks reasonable. But then you get to Next Gen and DS9 and it's, well, when they're off duty, they're pretty much just going to wear what they'd be wearing on duty. Like this thing, Sisko, it's even got like the divide where his stripe would be on his uniform.
Yeah.
He wears his comm badge. It's like you might as well just be wearing your uniform. And I think they do get better with it in DS9. Like Sisko starts wearing sort of things with like African tribal designs and things like that. And I get the sense that was probably Avery Brooks pushing for more.
Actually, yeah.
Once he got to shave his head, I think he got to dictate the character a little bit more. But it works so much better than this weird stuff that they're wearing here. But yeah, weird civilian clothes. They end up on this forest planet, which looks really nice, and they're doing all the studies and the scans and. There's some good stuff in this episode with sort of Ferengi versus Federation values, and you get Sisko and Quark. Like Quark's, I can see 2 words: exploitable resources.
What is it? That rule of acquisition he comes out with? Nature is fleeting, but platinum lasts forever.
Yeah, something like that. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, again, though, and Quark does make the point several times that, you know, this is Ferengi culture, you know.
Yeah.
There's nothing wrong with it. It's just
Quark's actually only gone on this because he wants something from Sisko.
Oh, that's it, exactly. Yeah, he wants to sell his stuff over the station.
He wants to be allowed to use the station monitors.
Yeah, and he thinks he can win Sisko over eventually.
But he actually, I think he actually wins this argument against Sisko.
I think he does to a large extent. And even though we're sort of being invited to poke fun at the Ferengi values a little bit, you do see, like, the good side of it, like when Nog tells him what the rule of acquisition is, Quark's really proud of him, so...
Yeah, you know, well done.
It isn't totally negative. It's just different, you know. And, like, you can even see sort of early hints here that, because obviously last episode we had the thing of Jake being Starfleet, but we're almost getting the hints here that Nog is going to want to be eventually, because he's doing really well with the surveys and everything, and when Sisko comes over and says, "Oh, you're doing good, lads," sort of thing, Nog looks really happy about it as well. It's not...
Yeah.
It's not like Nog's like, "Oh, I can't believe we've got to do all this." He's actually... Like,
I get the impression Nog's always behind in school, and Jake always helps him with some assignment he has to finish and do well in to pass. And I get the impression it's because of his Ferengi culture that they have him work in the bar or stock taking or doing something when he should be doing his homework or being in school.
Yeah,
or whatever.
That's it. Because obviously, Nog, to a lesser extent, but certainly Quark, obviously don't think any of that's useful. You know, that the only things you need to know is about making profit and this and the other. Whereas Nog obviously does want to learn about this stuff, and that informs his arc for the rest of the series. There's a really nice scene with Sisko and Jake where they're talking about, how they used to go on holidays and stuff with his mum, and you see the warmth between the characters, which I think is really, really good. And both actors are always brilliant at playing it, and we've talked before.
They have a great dynamic together. They play it.
Like we've talked before, haven't we, about the What You Leave Behind documentary and everything. And it is clear that Avery Brooks did treat him like a son off screen as well as screen, and that it really comes across. And then Quark sets himself on fire, which is really good. And then that leads to, like you say, another argument about the Ferengi and the Federation. And Quark does make really good points that it's because Ferengi values are very similar to what human values used to be like. Which, for us, in the real world, Ferengi are pretty much where we're at now,
Yeah, with all the trading and everything's about who can make the most. It's very capitalist society.
Yeah.
But it's like Quark points out, he goes, but we didn't ever have slavery.
Yeah.
That's barbaric that you did that, and yet you look down on us.
Yeah, exactly. He makes some very good points.
But I like where he's sort of like, that you just don't like Ferengi, do you? And he's there, yes I do. Name one that you like. See, I rest my case.
Yeah.
What if Jake wanted to marry a Ferengi? Well, I don't know. I rest my case.
Yeah.
And he has the better of Cisco in this.
He does, but it is very unlikely that Jake could meet a Ferengi female because they're not really allowed off the homeworld. But
no.
But that's by the by. But yeah, he does, because and Cisco does have a bit of a prejudice against Ferengi, and I think he does come round on that. We're working particularly with Nog and with Rom later on. I don't think he ever changed his mind on Black too much, but yeah.
Yeah, I think he learns very early on how to deal with Quark.
Oh,
he gets the measure of Quark. Literally in the first episode, he gets the measure of Quark.
Oh, yeah, he has. Brilliant. Like, there's a great... I can't remember which episode it is where they talk about it, and Quark says, you tried to persuade me to stay on the station, and Cisco said, I didn't persuade you, I blackmailed you. And it's like, that is what he did. So, yeah, he had Quark's number right from the start. And then this is where Eris turns up. So she turns up and zaps someone with this thing, this psychic bolt, which we'll no doubt talk about.
Yeah, like she says it's psychic powers. Now, this is never seen again. It's only ever seen in this episode. And it's either retcons that they were going to give the Vorta this power, and then decided not to because it was just probably going OP. Or she's got a hidden weapon on her.
I think my take on it has always been that it is a genetic thing, but it's been given to her specifically for this mission. Because if you look at what she tells Cisco later on, she basically tells him a massive pack of lies about who her species is and how they came to be in the Dominion and everything. And it might be that it was retconned afterwards. And in fact, that probably is the case. But I think it doesn't break the continuity for you to go, well, obviously she was meant to be lying to him. She's been told to lie to him. And it's possible that they just gave her that ability specifically for this.
Yeah, I've put it in my mind that instead of it being retcon, that she's actually got some sort of hidden weapon.
That works too,
that sort of repulsor.
And I think part of
because it doesn't kill anyone, it just stuns.
No, it's true. And, part of the reason I don't think we ever followed it up is that they never brought the character back. And I know that they tried a few times, but the actress was never available at the right time. So they always had to go with a different character, which is a shame. because it was clearly being set up that she was meant to come back. But we're getting ahead of ourselves with that. So the Jem'Hadar turn up then, and now our master plan comes to fruition. This is why we did Captive Pursuit, because their abilities are very, very similar to the Hunters and to Tosk. And we talked about when we looked at that episode, there's definitely some sort of link between the two. But it's clear.
Like, I think that they've sort of... I still stick with what I said then, that they've looked at them characters and they didn't like maybe the personalities or how they looked, but they liked some of the abilities, and they've sort of merged the two characters into one.
They've not quite got it there yet, but they're like, we like them. We want them to be reptilian. We want them to be able to cloak themselves. We want this warrior ethos that they've got. So, yeah. And, right, Nog, again, showing early sign that Nog's going to be a good Starfleet officer. Because straight away he says, why don't we beam up to the runabout? When Nog and Jake realise they can't find them. That's absolutely the right thing to do, Nog, because you can scan the planet and find them.
Yeah.
But Jake's like, no, we'll keep looking. No, Nog's got the right idea.
Yeah. The signs are there early on, aren't they, with Nog, where his character's going to go. When you know where his character ends up, you can see it early on.
Yeah,
a lot earlier on.
Yeah, and again, I don't know whether it was planned or maybe it's the writers when these episodes are being made thinking, I think we could end up putting Nog in Starfleet. You know, if we look at what we've already done with him, that could be where he ends up. So ultimately, they end up caught in this containment field and everything, and Quark kicks up a fuss to try and get some attention and everything. And he's still trying to... I think he thinks he can negotiate, because they know the Dominion. And
he thinks he can buy his way out because he's Ferengi. Because everything has a price.
Well, exactly. And Eris says something interesting. Like, she says the Founders don't exist. It's just a myth. And that's interesting with all the... Obviously, again, it's a lie, because basically everything she says in this episode is a lie. But that's interesting as well, with ultimately we find out the Founders are the Changelings, and everyone thought the Changelings didn't exist. So the kind of...
Up until this episode, everything about the Founders and Changelings has been myth and ancient stories.
And we don't obviously make the connection between the Founders and the Changelings until later on. And this is the first time we hear about the Founders. Like, we only start to find out a little bit about the structure of the Dominion. Like, we know there's Founders of it, we know the Jem'Hadar are the military of it, but beyond that, we don't.
Yeah, like up until this point, we think it's played that we look at the Dominion is a species.
Yeah.
Where the Dominion is actually an organisation. It's like Starfleet. Or the Federation.
Like the Federation, And the Jem'Hadar guy, and this is something we'll keep coming back to, but the Jem'Hadar basically says we're not tolerating any more incursions into our territory, and that's why we've locked you up. And there's this great stuff about him saying, I wish I could meet a Klingon. And they can't have known at this point that Worf was going to become a main character on DS9. But it's great, the fact... So I remember at the time, people, when Worf was announced as joining, they were like, maybe the Jem'Hadar will finally get to meet a Klingon warrior. So that just is a nice...
It is possible, actually, because Next Gen has just finished here.
It has, yeah.
So, and he's maybe signed up for he will be signed up for Generations, which should take him well into season 3 of DS9. So it maybe has already been that
maybe the idea is in the back of somebody's mind. Yeah, you never know.
Well, he's maybe already spoken to producers and writers and
never know.
Sort of like people high up. That can I carry on? Have you got space for another character?
Yeah. But it does feel like a little bit of setup there. Like, I want to meet a Klingon. Oh, you will do. Don't worry. Worf will be on his way eventually. There's a cool scene with Nog and Jake on the runabout where Nog sort of panics and he goes, escape pods, fire phasers. And
phasers, like put on torpedoes.
Yeah, I really like that. And that's when the ship sort of fires off into the station. And
well, no, it doesn't.
Well,
they've got the ship stuck. The ship that they're scared about. Yeah, it warps off. But this isn't the first time we see this sort of behaviour later from the Jem'Hadar, where a runabout will be in orbit, and you'll just leave it there.
That's true.
Why?
Yeah, I don't know.
Supposed to do this in Purgatory's shadow.
Yes, which is very convenient. I mean, they're episodes, but yeah,
we'll get to them. But
yeah, we will get to them in a.
But it does happen. It does seem to happen that the Jem'Hadar just ignore other ships if they're just sat there.
Yeah, very strange.
Which might have been useful for the Odyssey and all that to know in about an hour or two.
It might have been, yeah. So the Jem'Hadar ship appears, and this is something we're going to come back to time and time again when we talk about who's actually responsible for this war. And we see how powerful the Jem'Hadar are because he beams straight onto the station, straight into ops, and he makes it absolutely clear. He says going through the wormhole is interference with the Dominion. And Dax says, well, that's not going to stop us exploring. Whoa. Wait a minute, Dax.
Wait a minute. We're going into their territory and they're saying stop coming in. Yeah, you are interfering in our territory.
Yeah.
You're not welcome. You can't just say, well, we're going to...
Yeah.
You don't just go into Romulan space.
No, they've just told you that part of the galaxy is ours. We have a whole big empire, and we don't want you coming into it. And Dax says, nope, that's not going to stop us. And they've destroyed the new Bajor colony. They've destroyed loads of ships. They can move straight through force fields. I do think that they maybe make the Jem'Hadar a bit too powerful in this episode, and we maybe turn back on some of that stuff later on.
That's a bit like the Vorta with the psychic firing, and I think it's sort of like I think that they've thought about we're doing things a bit too OP.
Yes, I do think that's part of it because I remember seeing this episode the first time and being like, wow, they're like harder than the Borg. You know, they can do everything. They can pass shields. They can beam away. I mean, we'll get to that in a minute. But yeah, I think they do tone it down a little bit. Back on the runabout then, they managed to disable the lockouts after Jake nearly blows the ship up. But it's like, right, we've disabled the autopilot so we can do what we want now. Right, setting a course. You can't do that without the autopilot.
Computer set a course for the station. Autopilot is disengaged.
It were a good idea, Jake, and you did well doing it. And I like that they're just sort of moving along like it's like somebody drunk driving a car, like they'll run down, jumping through space. Then we get the captain of the Odyssey. So the Odyssey is a Galaxy-class ship. It turns up. You have a good line where Dax says, oh, you're going to offload the non-essential crew and everything. Maybe what they should have done is detach the saucer section.
And just send the battles drive.
And just send the battle bridge. But no, we don't do that because that's way too expensive to do that. But... you know, what are you talking about? You're lucky we've got a Galaxy-class ship on the show, never mind. But anyway...
Well, there's a reason that they have a Galaxy-class ship available for the show.
Well, yes.
A bit like how the Excelsior-class stayed in service for 100 years.
Yeah, and there's a bit of... Well, we'll get there when we get there, but there's a bit of controversy over the choice of the ship. I like the Odo.
Interesting fact for the week. The Excelsior has appeared in more episodes of Star Trek than Nog.
Really?
Yeah.
I suppose. Yeah, it was in a hell of a lot of TNG episodes.
And DS9 episodes.
Yeah. So I like how seriously they're all taking it. Like, Kira's really, like, geared up for it, and they are taking this seriously as a threat. And Odo's like, well, I'm going to go and keep an eye on Quark because no one else is going to. That's really nice. And he almost gets Kira to admit that she'd miss Quark. Almost.
Like, the thing is, Odo always plays it that him and Quark are enemies.
Yeah.
The more like frenemies.
Yeah, definitely.
Quark considers Odo a friend.
Yeah. And I think Odo does consider Quark a friend, really, but he's just not going to say
He just won't give him the satisfaction of knowing it.
Yeah. And that carries through right to the last ever episode, doesn't it, where he just sort of harumphs at him and walks anyway. Yeah. So the Odyssey arrives, O'Brien saves the kids on the runabout. At the same time, Eris uses her powers, Quark's deactivated the collar, and they make their escape. And Quark, actually, he grabs a gun, and, well, Sisko chucks in the gun, but he takes down one of the Jem'Hadar, so...
Yeah.
Bit of trivia there for you.
It has been mentioned before, though, that Quark had been in the Ferengi military.
He had, yeah. But yeah, good bit of trivia. Who was the first DS9 crew member to kill a Jem'Hadar? Quark.
Yeah.
And that'd catch a few. The Odyssey in the battle's taking a bit of a pounding. O'Brien manages to beam up Sisko. And then the battle scene's really good for the time and for DS9's budget at the time. And I mean, we'll get a lot better than this further down the line. But
the budget goes through the roof later.
This is probably the most spectacular TV battle we've had on Star Trek, on a TV show. Because the Battle of Wolf 359, you don't actually see much in Best of Both Worlds.
No, but you do get it in Emissary.
In Emissary,
you do. Emissary. Yeah. So I'd say that Emissary is probably the best one so far.
Emissary, yes, I forgot about that one. But still, this is pretty good stuff. And then the Jem'Hadar ship does a suicide run and destroys the Odyssey.
Yeah, the Odyssey's turned round to try and escape.
So it is they're just making a point that they will do anything. And that makes them scary as well. The fact that they don't value their own life. And
that the Jem'Hadar will just smash their own ship up to destroy you.
And again, that, even though we don't know it at the time, that ties into really the fact that the Jem'Hadar are basically a slave species to the Dominion. That they don't mean anything. They're not bothered. They'll send, if killing a crew of Jem'Hadar kills a Federation starship, then the Dominion's
that's victory to the Jem'Hadar.
Exactly, it's job done. And a bit of controversy over the fact, I know at the time, some fans were pretty pissed off that they blew up a Galaxy-class ships. They felt like, you've just cancelled TNG, TNG's finished, and now on this other show, you're blowing up a ship that looks exactly like the Enterprise. And
like to be fair, sort of as DS9's gone on, and even to an extent, Voyager's probably hold its own against the Galaxy-class ship. But the Federation started building warships. The Galaxy-class ship, and I've seen a lot where it's literally described as a big mall in space.
Yeah, it is. It's a science ship. It's a peacetime ship. Definitely.
It was built when the Federation had no enemies. They're out exploring.
Yeah.
It's ended all the wars. They had this huge ship. Yeah, it does have lots of phaser banks.
Yeah,
Is it
it
10
can
phaser
defend
banks
itself,
and
but it's not.
it can defend itself, but it's not built for war. It's an explorer.
Exactly. And I think the other thing was it was almost like, is it having a dig at TNG, saying we're better than TNG by blowing up their ship? And I don't think there's any truth to that. But
I don't think there's any. I think it's like the reality is that they had a limited amount of models, and they will have had and this will have cost a lot of money because it's a physical model to blow up.
Yeah, and it's a good effect as well, where you see like the wreckage from the main body spins out and hits the nacelle, and though I do think I don't think it was done out of malice, like we're blowing up the next gen ship, but it does send a message. They've just blown up the equivalent of the Enterprise, so this is a threat that we have to take
This
seriously.
is a serious threat. The Borg didn't manage to do that.
Exactly. And then it finishes off. We get Quark realizes that the collar doesn't actually do anything. I like the fact that he's pocketed it, so he's thinking, I can sell this. So
he's thinking, this is good technology.
That's great motivation and perfectly in character. And then Sisko confronts Eris and says, you're one of the founders. And she rightly says, she doesn't say I'm not, but she says, you think they'd waste time with you. And she beams away. And this is another thing where I think it's, again, a little bit overpowerful that we drop later on. So it's like, where did she beam to? Does that mean that they've got cloaking technology? Is it implied that they've beamed her back to the Gamma Quadrant? You know what? Never get an answer.
I assumed that the ship that had come through that had the Jem'Hadar on has stayed in the vicinity of the station, but out of sort of scanner range, and they have long distance transporting.
Yeah, that's
I've never thought that she been through the wormhole, and I don't think they've got cloaking devices.
No, but I remember at the time thinking, I wonder how she's done
where she's gone.
And it's one of them. It's like they've got better transporter technology than we've seen before, and I don't think that's particularly followed up on later on.
Well, we have had Scotty's transwarp formula.
Well, yes,
transwarp beaming.
That's many years later in real time, earlier in Star Trek time, in a different universe.
I'm sure I think it's actually mentioned in TOS.
Transwarp beaming, maybe. I can't remember.
I'm sure that there's something mentioned. I'm not sure if he does it, but I think it's mentioned.
It might be. And then it finishes with Sisko being badass, saying, she'll be back and we'll be ready. So, well, she won't be back because she couldn't sort out the actress.
When the Dominion come, we're going to be at the front. And he's right, they are going to be at the front.
Oh, they are. And it's a really good... It's not a to-be-continued cliffhanger, but it is... it doesn't literally say to be continued on screen, but then not many things do these days. Because you sort of expect everything to end with a cliffhanger now, so you don't really need to...
Well...
You don't need to
be
that will continue.
It doesn't so much end with an unresolved story.
No.
Because the story of the episode is wrapped up.
Yeah.
All done. But it does sort of have an end to what we've had for 2 seasons of them just being explorers and
this is
and little bits of this.
This is the end of it. One of DS9.
And we're going to have something new starting in season 3.
Yeah, the prologue to DS9 is done.
We've done 2 years of a bit of a build up and doing episode of the week, planet of the week, monster of the week for 2 years. You've seen that in TOS and TNG for 10 years. We've done 2 years of it. We're going to do something else now.
Yeah, and it's...
Strap yourselves in, here we go.
Indeed, yeah. It's going to be really good fun talking about it. So that's what we're doing next week, is we're going to... Because it's a 2-part episode, the opening to season 3, the search part 1 and 2, we're just going to do that as one episode of Retrek because it doesn't make sense to do them separately. They are one story, so we're going to stick with that.
Yeah, we'll probably do that with quite a few of the two-parters coming up.
Yeah, we will. We will pick up Barclay's adventures in Voyager when we've got just a single episode of DS9 to talk about. But looking forward to next week talking about the Search Parts 1 and 2. If you want to get in touch with us in the meantime, you can tweet us at RetrekPod. You can email us retrekpod@gmail.com, or you can come and join us on the Facebook group. Just search for Retrek. But for this week, thanks for trekking with us this time, and we'll see you next time on the Retrek.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Fascinating.